These days there are more children's books available than ever before. So where do you start when you want to choose a book for a child? Niamh Baldwin of Waterford City Library explains how the children's book section is arranged.
They'll be organised by age, then maybe in fiction or non-fiction, non-fiction being nature, sports, history, anything like that. Age generally 0 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8 and then 9 to 13 before you go into your teenage section then. You can and you should start from the moment a child is born. I mean, babies, the moment they open their eyes, they're learning from sight and sound and sensation. So reading to them is stimulating and soothing them, just the sound of your voice.
Rachel felt her heart thump with excitement.
Sharon Cody tells us when she started reading to her daughter Ciara.
Around 2 and 3, just before she started play school. And after that then Ciara kind of got very independent herself and wanted to read her own little books. But when we did start reading, it was all the classic stories, your Cinderella and Little Red Riding Hood and Snow White, the ones that we all heard when we were children.
Reading to the child, obviously, it improves their listening comprehension, it stimulates speech development. A child learns speech development from being read. They're like sponges, they soak up words. So when they're hearing you reading to them and they're listening to these words and the pronunciations, and after 6 months they'll start imitating the words and talking back to you. But it builds up their vocabulary. They hear these words when they're older, they're seeing the words, they're hearing the pronunciations, so they're learning their vocabulary and they're learning their words.
When I was reading a book to Ciara, just to include her, I'd pick, say, a certain word at the beginning of the story, and throughout, that would be Ciara's word to say, you know, and I'd pick a different one each time, just to make her familiar with the different words. And hopefully, I think that would have helped her as well when she started school, that she had that little bit more before she started picking up her school books.
If a child has a basic knowledge of language and literacy before they get to school, basic as in they know that printed text is word, they know that the pictures represent objects, even that a book is read from the front to the back, and that better equips them then to deal with formal reading instruction that they will get from their teachers.
Try to find time during the week to read to your child. It's not always easy.
When I was working full-time, it was a bit difficult, so in the evenings we'd take time out, and bedtime mainly. That was relaxing time. Ciara would take out her books or I'd take out the book, and we'd sit together or lie down together and we'd read our books.
I'm reading Ruby the Red Fairy from Rainbow Magic. I like reading by myself and with my mum, because if I'm stuck on words, she'll help me and things like that.
What general advice does Niamh have for parents about choosing books for their child?
The advice that I would give to parents when selecting a book would be, first of all, to consider the age group that they're looking for, and then also the standard that the child is at. A lot of kids, they might be advanced for the age group that the books would be in. They might have more complex vocabulary, they might have longer attention spans, so they can deal with more sophisticated or more complex stories. You can't always go by what one person likes. You have to take into consideration where they are with their reading and what they're interested in as well.
As well as providing books, libraries sometimes give children a chance to meet their favourite author.
Children are very excited to meet the authors, and then they always feel they're meeting somebody famous, and we tend to send the books out to the schools before they get there, so they're familiar with the work, so they know, and the authors then themselves are delighted that, you know, their books have been read, and so they come in, they meet the author, they have loads of questions. Kids are so curious and they want to know, you know, where did you come up with your ideas and that, so they're always very excited to come. And it's great for us too then, because a lot of them wouldn't have been in the library, and now they know where the library is and they know they can come in, so they go home and they say, oh Mammy, I was in the library today and I saw this, can we go in on Saturday?
Reading, it just brings them out of themselves, and it just really gets their imaginations going, and children need to have good imaginations, and they need to be able to sit down and read their little stories and write their little stories and get lost. I mean, that's what childhood is all about.
Rain stops before we get off the ferry, said Mr. Walker.
And what magazines and comics are the children reading now in Sheriff Street where you're teaching?
Well, they read a whole manner of things. I wish they were reading maybe Jane Austen and books like that, but I have to realise that when I was young as well, I didn't read that much.
You weren't into books?
Only magazines and sports magazines and football magazines. So anything a child wants to read is a thing that you should encourage them to read. There's no point trying to get them to read something that they won't read.
No, it doesn't matter what it is, does
exactly.
it?
So, I mean, if it's a comic
Mm.
book, obviously appropriate for their age, that they're interested in reading, well, certainly they should be encouraged to read that, and kids will read things and enjoy things that they want to read.
Do you still read Beano?
No, but I'm still read the old football magazine and things like that, you know, which is pretty much at my level.
Well, these days there are magazines out there on just about every subject: DIY, gossip and entertainment, current affairs, business and finance, health and fitness, home interiors. The list is endless. So no matter what your interests are, there's bound to be a magazine out there for you.
I probably read about 2 or 3 magazines a week.
Mostly fashion magazines, Marie Claire, maybe Cosmopolitan, stuff like that.
I used to get Match a lot, but a lot of Manchester United stuff because that's the team I support.
Say music, so NME or and the male-orientated magazines like Nuts and things like that.
No matter what you're interested in, there's bound to be a magazine out there that you would enjoy. Simone Kenny is the editor of the Irish magazine Woman's Way. She explains what kind of magazine it is.
Woman's Way is a weekly magazine. It's aimed at 30 to 55-year-old women. We generally feature real lives, celebrity gossip, fashion, beauty, gardening, a lot of kind of lifestyle features.
If you know what magazine you want to buy, you can scan the shelves looking for the right one. But many of us just skim through the magazines looking for one to catch our eye. So magazine designers try to do just that with a photo or a strong cover story.
A cover story is basically a story that's featured on the cover that is inside the magazine. Generally the main kind of cover story would be a celebrity or a soap star that we feature on the cover. We would have an interview with them inside the magazine. And there's a lot of magazines on the newsstands at the moment, so to try and kind of make it stand out, generally we'll kind of use primary colours.
Near the start of any magazine, you'll find a list of contents.
The contents of the magazine is a list of what's inside of the magazine. It's generally a few lines, what the name of the feature is, what the feature is about. So it's just basically explaining what page number that different features are on.
Sometimes the list of contents lists the articles in the order they come in the magazine, but often they don't.
In our magazine, the list of contents is arranged by the kind of genre of feature. So we would have health and beauty, real life, celebrity, lifestyle. So that's the way we would generally display our contents.
So if you're interested in reading the article about celebrity gossip, you can turn straight to page 8.
I like all the gossip on the stars, everything about what they're wearing and what they're up to.
If I see someone that I recognise, I'll read the article that's associated with the picture.
Big articles, so it's usually go for them straight away.
Eoin, are there any magazines that you read regularly?
Well, but mostly political magazines are things I'd be interested in. I know that in teaching and obviously in politics as well, you read a lot of reports and a lot of documents and things like that. So I read a lot of newspapers, national, local newspapers, but I do like to sit down the odd time and file through something. I wish I had more time to enjoy a good book.
Cleona, do you? Have you a subscription, for example, to any magazine?
No, I'm afraid I haven't. No, I don't actually subscribe to anything. But I like reading magazines opportunistically, you know, in the hairdressers, in the dentist's waiting room and so on. And so in the hairdressers, I'm afraid it comes down to Hello magazine, maybe.
Well, reading magazines is a fun way to practice your reading, and the great thing about them is that you can spend as little or as much time as you want to with them. Here's some more useful tips about reading a magazine article.
Magazines use photos to attract the reader's attention, and readers use them to choose which articles to read.
Magazines today are very visual, so photos play a huge role in magazines, and we generally try to use strong images to whatever story we use. The function of photo captions are just to give information on who is in the picture, what story it relates to, and any kind of other details that might tie it in with the story that it's featured alongside.
Headlines also help readers to choose which articles they want to read. So if you're a parent, you might be attracted by this story.
The headlines are important because it's the first thing the readers see when they open a feature, so it's going to give them some kind of indication of what the feature is about.
The stories inside a magazine are different from news stories in a newspaper.
News ones tend to be more current and factual. They will provide a lot of information in the first paragraph, whereas magazines can basically tease out the story throughout the article.
So where do people read their magazines?
Well, if I got a magazine while I was in town, I'd probably go in somewhere to sit down and have a read over a cup of coffee maybe, you know.
I read them on the train home at the weekend, and whenever I'm bored in the apartment or whatever.
Trains, buses, anything like that. Just a quick flick when you're on your way to work or something like that.
If I'm going for a cup of coffee or something like that, I'll have one in my bag, my college gear, and I just kind of whip it out then and have a read through.
If magazines didn't have readers, they couldn't survive, so magazines like to hear from their readers.
We have a lot of areas in the magazine where we request the readers to write in. One of the main parts would be our letters page. Other areas of the magazine we would request readers to write in is for fashion dilemmas, for gardening, different places like that, and we love any kind of feedback that we can get.
Reading magazines helps you learn more words and practice your reading skills. Perhaps your writing skills too, if you decide to write into your favourite magazine. But most of all, we read magazines for pleasure.
And Éoin, let's hope lots of children will be reading this for pleasure. Where can people find it or find out more about it? And the Read to Write campaign?
Yeah, if they go onto the website www.writetoread.ie, all the information is there, and we do have 20,000 free books written by Éoin Ní Lamhna, which we're hoping to give to as many children as possible, just for them to enjoy reading and the gift of reading.
So she wrote the story? She
wrote the story, she's involved in the campaign, she was happy to lend her expertise to the Write to Read campaign. We're delighted that she did that. And I think the gift of reading is by far one of the most important gifts we can give to any child, and hopefully these books will help that. So the website is writetoread.ie.
Did you enjoy it yourself?
I did, but I won't ruin the ending for anybody who wants to read it themselves.
OK. Well, that's it for today, I'm afraid. We'd like to thank our guests for joining us, to Dr. Cliona Buckley and Éoin Ó Ríordáin. Thank you both very much for coming in. In the next programme, we'll be looking at how to use rhyming words to improve your spelling, how learning gets easier over time if you stick with it, and we'll also be finding out how to place a bet. In the meantime, though, here are the contact details again to get hold of your free student workbook that goes with the series.
For your free student pack and workbook, free phone 1800 20 20 65. That's 1800 20 20 65. Or you can go online and visit www.rug.ie or write to The Really Useful Guide to Words and Numbers, care of Nala, 76 Lower Gardner Street, Dublin 1.